Before we start, a quick note about what this channel is and what it isn't. This isn't a recap channel, and it's not a highlight reel. We're here for the parts of Panem that happen after the cameras turn away. The systems behind the games, the contracts hidden inside victory, the lives that keep unfolding long after the anthem ends. Each video on this channel is built to slow things down, to follow the logic the Capitol relies on, the details it hopes you won't connect, and the people who live with the consequences year after year. If that's the kind of Hunger Games analysis you're looking for, you're in the right place. Subscribing just means you'll keep a seat here when we move on to the next story. Now, let's start where Panem always wants you to stop paying attention. You walk into the ruins of Victor's village. Everything is ash and silence, except for one thing: a perfect white rose sitting in Katniss's destroyed house where her reward for winning used to be. At face value, she's the face of the rebellion now, the Mockingjay, the symbol of hope for every district. But if she's supposed to be this triumphant hero, why is she still surrounded by President Snow's calling card of control and threat? That rose does not belong in a victory mansion. It belongs in a warning. We all know the surface level story. Katniss volunteers for Prim at the Reaping, survives the games, outsmarts the Capitol with the berries, gets thrown back in for the Quarter Quell, survives again, inspires uprisings, becomes the Mockingjay, and helps bring down the Capitol. It's the neat version you remember from the movies, the one that turns her into a clean, chosen heroine with a bow, an arrow, and a destiny. But here's the real question: when does Katniss ever actually choose any of that? From the very first games, every major choice she makes is boxed in by someone else's rules. The Reaping forces her hand with Prim. The arena forces her to perform for sponsors. Snow forces her fake romance with Peter to keep the districts quiet. By the time District 13 shows up with a Mockingjay costume and a script, she's already been trained to understand that her survival depends on playing a role for a camera. So why does it have to be her specifically? Why not Finnick, who already has Capitol fame and a tragic backstory? Why not Johanna, who openly hates the system? Why not Peter, who's literally the one who can speak, persuade, and promise a future on TV? There is a lot to uncover here, because the story keeps insisting Katniss is the chosen one, while quietly proving she's the most controlled one. This is where we talk about the contradiction the text will not shut up about. Katniss is sold to you as a hero, but on the page, she's traumatized, dissociating, frequently suicidal, and constantly being handled. Cinna turns her into the girl on fire. Plutarch turns her into the Mockingjay. Coin turns her grief over Rue, over Prim, over District 12 into a weapon. Anytime she tries to aim at her own target, someone else is already moving her hand. That part matters because it shifts what the rebellion even is. Maybe the Hunger Games isn't just about overthrowing Snow. Maybe the real war is over who gets to own Katniss's image, her pain, and her aim. Snow uses a white rose in a ruined Victor's village to say, "You're still mine." Coin uses a blackbird on a uniform to say, "No, you're ours now." So when Katniss finally points her arrow at someone unexpected at the end, what is she actually rebelling against? In the next section, we're going to cover how the Mockingjay was manufactured long before she agreed to wear the wings. From girl on fire to weapon on camera, what's really at stake? So when Katniss finally points her arrow at someone unexpected, we have to rewind and ask, How did a girl who just wanted to feed her sister become the most argued over image in Panem? Back then, Katniss's whole strategy was invisibility. You're in District 12, slipping under the fence to hunt, trading squirrels for bread, doing everything you can to stay off the capital's radar. Her promise is simple. Keep Prim alive, keep the peacekeepers uninterested, keep her family out of the games, no speeches, no symbols, just survival. Now zoom out to later. That same girl is on every screen in every district, replayed in slow motion, in wedding dresses that burn into feathers, in propaganda spots scored with dramatic music. At face value, she looks powerful. She's the Mockingjay, the face of hope. But here's the real question. When your image is everywhere, how much of you is actually yours anymore? This is where we talk about stakes. In universe, it's not just rebellion versus capital. It's a custody battle over meaning. Snow wants Katniss to stand for a very specific threat. Step out of line and I will hurt what you love on camera. Coin and Plutarch want her to stand for a different promise. A clean, noble uprising with a photogenic girl at the center, carefully edited for broadcast. Same bow, same braid, completely different story pasted on top. So why does District 13 need a Mockingjay at all? Why can't they just fight the old-fashioned way, with soldiers and bombs and no bird costume? Why is Coin a military leader spending so much time in a studio? There is a lot to uncover here. District 13 has weapons, but not trust. The other districts barely remember it exists. Katniss's defiance in the arena, Rue's flowers, the berries, those gave the rebellion a shared emotional language. 13 isn't just waging a war, it's trying to hijack a relationship between one traumatized girl and the rest of Panem. And why does Snow respond so personally? Why the white roses in her home, the threats to Peter, the fixation on her rather than on, say, Beatty's tech? Because her image is more dangerous than her bow. A bow kills a body, a symbol recruits a district. Snow understands what Suzanne Collins built the whole series on. The real battlefield is the screen. That part matters because even victory doesn't end the games. After Snow falls, Katniss is still costumed, still marched into a public square, still framed for an execution that Coin fully intends to televise. Different president, same arena logic. She's still a piece, just on a new board. And once you see that, the moral map of the story tilts. If Katniss isn't a straightforward hero, if she's mostly someone powerful people keep trying to aim, then we're not watching good rebels versus bad capital. We're watching competing systems trying to weaponize the same broken teenager. So why did it have to be her? Specifically, in the next section, we're going to cover how her trauma, her history with the games, and a few key choices by Cinna and Plutarch quietly manufacture the Mockingjay long before District 13 ever rolls camera. The real question, why Katniss, and why this symbol? So if the Mockingjay isn't really about good rebels versus bad capital, here's the real question, why Katniss, and why this bird? Why does this one traumatized girl from the poorest district end up as the face of a revolution that spans the entire country? At face value, you'd say it's because she's brave or because she volunteered for Prim. That's the story the districts want to believe. But the reason she becomes the Mockingjay isn't that she's the smartest tactician in the arena. It's that she's the most narratively useful piece on the board for people who understand cameras, editing, and spectacle. Snow sees it, Coin sees it. Katniss is valuable because she already comes with a story the audience can't stop watching. This is where we talk about the lens we're going to use. Instead of treating her as a chosen one with a destiny, we're going to cover her as a product of media, militarism, and trauma that's baked into the series from the beginning. Suzanne Collins literally got the idea while flipping between war coverage and reality TV. Katniss is what happens when those two channels merge into one girl's life, when your grief becomes programming and your survival becomes content. Think about her origin story as a symbol. It's not pure rebellion. It starts with a capital mistake. Jabberjays were designed as surveillance tech, a government tool to record and repeat rebel conversations. When that plan collapses, the birds are abandoned, they mate with mockingbirds, and you get mockingjays, an accidental species the capital can't control. That part matters because the pin on Katniss's jacket, the song in Rue's Forest, and eventually the entire Mockingjay brand all grow out of a failed state experiment. The symbol is literally government control backfiring. District 13 just finishes the job. They take this wild, semi-illegal emblem and graft it onto Katniss. The costume, the fiery dresses, the propo, they all promise freedom and agency. You're told she's choosing this role, but how many real choices does she get? In the first games, Cinna puts her in fire, and suddenly she's the girl on fire, whether she wants that relationship with the capital audience or not. In Catching Fire, her wedding dress burns away into a Mockingjay costume Cinna never told her about. In Mockingjay, Coin's team scripts her lines, stages her visits to the districts, and edits out anything that doesn't sell the right kind of hope. Every time Katniss reaches for control, the frame tightens. Rue's death? She's just trying to honor a friend, but the flowers around the body become a viral act of defiance. Snow's roses? A personal threat, but also a set piece that keeps her locked in a psychological games with him. Even Coin's big speeches are built around her image, her pain, her importance to the cause. There is a lot to uncover here, because once you start tracking how Cinna's designs, Plutarch's strategy, Snow's punishments, and Coin's offers all converge on this one girl, you start to see a darker pattern. The real twist isn't that Katniss becomes a weapon, it's who she finally decides to aim at, and what that choice says about the Mockingjay itself. How we'll break this down, and the twist waiting at the end. So here's how we're going to untangle all of that, because the Mockingjay isn't born in one moment. It's layered, it's accidental, and then it's weaponized on purpose. First, we're going to cover where the Mockingjay symbol actually comes from, before Katniss ever spins on a stage in a fire dress. At face value, it's just a pretty bird on a pin from a poor district. But that part matters, because the bird itself is a mistake of the capital's making. Jabberjays sent to spy, abandoned, and then turned into something new when the districts refused to cooperate. We'll trace how that failed surveillance project becomes jewelry, then a token in the games, then the thing the cameras cannot stop zooming in on every time Katniss raises her bow. From there, we move into the arena and watch how Katniss accidentally becomes the symbol inside the games long before Coin ever says the word Mockingjay. Why does Rue's four-note song echo through the trees? Why does covering Rue's body in flowers hit harder than any kill shot? We're going to look at how one dead girl from District 11 and one furious girl from District 12 create a visual that the capital broadcasts to every home, giving the districts a shared grief and a shared image to rally around. Then we zoom out to the political chessboard. This is where we talk about Snow versus Coin and the quiet war over one traumatized teenager's face. Snow tries to frame her as a dutiful victor who knows her place, threatening Gale, parading her through the districts, and turning every appearance into a test of obedience. Coin, on the other hand, brands her outright, the Mockingjay, property of District 13. Why does Snow send roses? And why does Coin send cameras? Why does each leader need to be the one who owns Katniss's image for their version of hope to work? Next, we'll dig into the emotional engine underneath all that strategy. District 12's ashes, the charred victor's village that somehow still stands, Rue's family raising their hands in silent salute. We'll ask how much of Katniss's rebellion is ideology and how much is raw grief being rerouted into propaganda. Here's the real question. When she screams at the bombed ruins of her home, who is she really angry at? The Capitol or the people filming her reaction and calling it useful? After that, we'll compare how the books and movies handle all of this. The books linger on her reluctance, the bargaining for Peter's immunity, Coin's coldness in those underground meetings. The films streamline, softening some of District 13's cruelty and emphasizing spectacle over the slow, grinding pressure on Katniss's mental health. We'll ask why those choices were made and what version of the Mockingjay the audience is supposed to walk away with. And then, at the end, we'll cash in on the twist we've been circling. Because the real payoff isn't just why Katniss becomes the Mockingjay, but why in the final execution she points her arrow at Coin instead of Snow. We'll break down that single decision as the moment the symbol finally chooses for itself, and what that says about who the Mockingjay was really rebelling against the entire time. Welcome to the arena behind the arena. So that's where we're headed. But before we step into that execution square, this is where we talk about what you've actually walked into with this channel. If you're new here, if you just fell down a rabbit hole after a rewatch or a TikTok edit of If We Burn You Burn With Us, this channel does the opposite of a quick hype montage. We slow everything down. We freeze frame the games, the speeches, the quiet kitchen scenes in Victor's village, and we keep asking, why does this moment hit that hard? And who benefits from it? At face value, The Hunger Games is a survival story with a strong heroine and some very dramatic dresses. But here's the real question. Why did Suzanne Collins build a world where every powerful image of Katniss is mediated through a screen, a stylist, or a script? There is a lot to uncover here, and we're going to cover the messy relationship between story, spectacle, and control across the books and the movies. On this channel, we live in the lore. That means the mining accidents in District 12, the Jabberjay experiment that accidentally creates Mockingjays, the exact wording of Snow's threats, the way Coin's speeches echo Capitol rhetoric on purpose. We zoom in on the world building and the politics underneath the spectacle, then zoom back out to ask what that part matters, because it changes how you read every heroic moment. If you stick around to the end of this video, you won't just be able to say, Katniss becomes the Mockingjay because she's brave. You'll be able to explain, with receipts, why she was the only person who could carry that symbol, why that's less a power fantasy and more a horror story, and why her final arrow is the logical conclusion of the role everyone else forced on her. So if you want more of that, deep dives into victors, districts, and the mechanics of Panem's control systems, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next breakdown. We go from the architecture of Victor's village to the editing choices in Caesar's interviews, from Rue's flowers to Peter's hijacking. And we keep circling the same question: who's directing the scene and who's paying the price? Because from here on, we're entering a different arena, not the televised games with clear rules and a countdown clock, but the political arena where Katniss's image is the main weapon. Snow and Coin aren't trying to kill her outright. They're trying to program her. Cinna, Plutarch, even the Propot team in District 13 become stylists of her soul. And the twist, in this arena, surviving doesn't mean staying alive. It means figuring out who you're actually performing for. And that's where we're going next. Before the bird, how a failed capital weapon created the Mockingjay. So when we talk about Katniss becoming the Mockingjay, we tend to start with the girl on fire, or the berries, or that arrow at the force field. But the symbol she's wearing, that bird on her chest, was already an old capital mistake. This is where we talk about Jabberjays. Before there was a Mockingjay pin, there was a weapon. The capital literally engineered a bird whose whole job was to spy on you. Jabberjays could memorize entire human conversations and repeat them back verbatim to their handlers. At face value, it's genius. Nature turned into a recording device, an organic wiretap dropped into rebel forests and district safe houses. But here's the real question. What happens when the people you're spying on realize the trees are listening? In the dark days, the rebels figure it out. They start feeding Jabberjays nonsense, fake plans, invented locations, conversations designed to waste the capital's time. The games aren't on screens yet, but the same principle is there. The capital thinks it's directing the narrative. The districts start trolling the script. The program gets written off as a failure, and the capital just dumps the birds. They abandon the Jabberjays in the wild, assuming they'll die out without handlers or breeding partners. That part matters because it shows the capital's blind spot. They understand control, they don't understand consequences, they don't ask what happens when a genetically engineered surveillance machine meets a regular old mockingbird. What happens is Mockingjays. Jabberjays mate with mockingbirds, and suddenly you've got this new hybrid species the capital never planned for. They can't repeat human words anymore, but they can echo tunes, whistles, patterns. They turn language into melody. Instead of reporting secrets back to Snow, they're passing songs between trees, between hunters, between districts. The weapon loses its vocabulary and gains vibes. There is a lot to uncover here, because that's the exact irony the story is built on. The capital tried to create a perfect listener that would send information up the chain. Instead, it accidentally created a perfect amplifier that sends emotion sideways. Mockingjays don't serve the government. They serve whoever sings first. And that's where Katniss comes in. Long before she's born, the world is already haunted by this reminder that control can backfire. By the time she's trading tunes with Rue in the arena, the Mockingjay is a district in-joke and a quiet threat. When she wears the pin, she's not inventing a symbol. She's stepping into an existing relationship between the districts and a bird the capital can't get rid of. Katniss becomes the human version of that bird. She can't, or won't, speak in the clean political language Coin wants. She doesn't deliver perfect speeches about policy or promise a tidy future, but she echoes something more dangerous. Raw grief in Rue's song, rage in her salute to District 11, disbelief in those broken propos after Peter's torture. She turns experience into feeling and feeling into action without ever fully belonging to Snow or to Coin. So by the time District 13 tries to brand her the Mockingjay, they're tapping into a symbol that was already born from the Capitol's failure. Any new Mockingjay, bird or girl, is inherently unstable. You can point it at your enemy, sure, but you can't be certain where the echo will land. And the Capitol learns that the hard way when Katniss's final arrow doesn't go where anyone scripted. We're going to cover how that one shot proves she was never their mouthpiece, only ever their echo gone rogue. The first spark, Rue, flowers, and an unplanned revolution. That arrow going off script, it doesn't start in the arena with Snow or Coin. It starts with a 12-year-old girl in a treetop, humming. This is where we talk about Rue. You remember the scene. The games have already chewed through most of the tributes. Katniss is bruised, burned, half feral from survival mode. Then Rue points to the Trackerjacker nest, shares the plan, shares the Mockingjay song. There is a relationship forming that has nothing to do with sponsors or strategy. At face value, she's an ally. In practice, she's the first person who makes Katniss feel safe in the arena, which is exactly why her death hits so hard. Marvel's spear comes out of nowhere. There's no speech, no villain monologue, just a sound, a body, and Rue choking on her own blood. The right game's move would be simple. Close her eyes, take her supplies, keep moving. That's what the system trains you to do. But here's the real question. What does it mean that Katniss does the opposite? She sings. She waits until Rue is gone, then she stages the body. Carefully, deliberately. Flowers in the hair, flowers around the wound, transforming a dead tribute into something the cameras can't frame as a clean kill. That part matters because Katniss is not trying to win in that moment. She's trying to insist to the entire country that this girl was more than a piece in the games, and the Capitol broadcasts it. On paper, it's just another tragic close-up, but there is a lot to uncover here. Katniss has accidentally created a visual message. A child murdered by the Capitol's ritual, honored by another child who refuses to perform the script of ruthless victor in the making. She even gives the three-finger salute to Rue's camera. It's grief, but it's also communication. She's talking to Rue's district without knowing their names. We see the answer when the cameras cut to District 11. The workers stop, they raise their hands in the same salute. In the film, they go further, smashing crates, charging peacekeepers, turning one broadcast into an uprising. Why does that specific image crack the surface? Because Katniss has stumbled into the language of propaganda. She's made an image simple enough to travel. Flowers, song, a salute of shared mourning, and a broken promise of safety for the Capitol's children. No speech from Coin, no directive from Snow. Neither of them storyboarded this. It's pure Katniss, unfiltered, unscripted, and therefore incredibly dangerous. And once both sides realize how the districts respond to her, they will fight to claim that instinct, to package that same raw grief as the Mockingjay brand. So here's the real question. Without Rue's death, is there any Mockingjay at all? The rebellion doesn't begin with a manifesto. It begins with one girl refusing to let another girl disappear neatly into the Capitol's edit. And the moment Snow tries to erase that image, someone else is already planning how to weaponize it. We're going to cover how that theft of grief becomes District 13's entire strategy, and why Katniss never fully cooperates. Sinner's fire, designing a symbol before Katniss knows she is won. Cinna is already waiting at the edge of that grief. While Katniss is still just a girl who buried Rue in flowers, he's sketching something else. A symbol the Capitol can't quietly edit out of frame. His first move is deceptively simple: the girl on fire. At face value, it's just smart branding. District 12 does coal, so you put the coal in flames. But here's the real question. Why does that one costume burn so hard into the Capitol's memory that it rewrites what 12 even is? Before Cinna, 12 is shorthand for poverty, mining accidents, and tributes who die in the bloodbath. After that chariot ride, the District of Soot suddenly owns the most visually powerful entrance in the games. Cinna doesn't put Katniss in rags and coal dust. He turns the raw material of her district into spectacle. Fire stops being the thing that kills her father underground and becomes the thing that crowns her. That part matters because the Capitol audience isn't being asked to pity 12 anymore. They're being asked to be obsessed with it. Obsession is harder to bomb out of existence. But Cinna's real genius is psychological. He actually reads Katniss. She hates being watched. She freezes on stage. She loathes interviews. She's not a natural performer. Most stylists would fight that. Cinna works with it. He keeps building outfits that feel like armor on the inside, while projecting this almost mythic persona on the outside. The training outfit with the subtle flames, the interview dresses that move when she spins but cover her up when she stands still. You can feel the relationship between what she needs and what the Capitol wants to see. So she walks out terrified. The crowd sees a warrior goddess. Cinna has effectively split her in two. Private Katniss, protected under layers of fabric and metal, and public Katniss, a story the Capitol can't stop watching. There is a lot to uncover here, because that split is exactly what propaganda needs. Then he escalates. The wedding dress in Catching Fire isn't just a dress, it's a live grenade. Snow forces a wedding narrative on her to sell the quarterquell as a twisted fairy tale. Cinna smiles, nods, and designs the gown the Capitol expects, but he rigs it to burn into a Mockingjay costume on live television. This is where we talk about open rebellion through fashion. In one spin, he hijacks Snow's promise of romance and turns it into a threat. Pattern interrupt. Katniss doesn't plan this. She doesn't approve the symbolism. She doesn't fully grasp the risk until the feathers are already on her shoulders and the audience is gasping. Cinna is making a political decision with her body as the canvas. He's telling every district, this victor is not yours. Snow, she's ours. And once that image exists, the girl on fire literally reborn as a Mockingjay, you can't walk it back. Before District 13 ever rolls out propaganda reels, Cinna has made Katniss too iconic to eliminate without consequences. Kill a tribute, the games go on. Kill a symbol the whole Capitol just applauded, and you prove the rebellion's entire point. Which raises the next problem. If your symbol survives, who actually owns her? District 13 has an answer, and it's much colder than Cinna's. Snow's problem. You can't kill a ghost on live TV. So if District 13 wants to own the symbol, what does Snow do with the original? You can't just delete the girl who broke your own games on live TV. Here's the real question. How do you kill a rebellion without killing the person everyone's already decided is its face? This is where we talk about that visit in Victor's village. Snow doesn't send a peacekeeper. He shows up in Katniss's pristine new house, stands under her family photos, and opens with the berries. Not her kill count, not her score, the berries. He's telling you exactly what he's worried about. Not Katniss the hunter, but Katniss the story. The districts saw a girl who would rather die than play by capital rules. The capital saw their own control slip for half a second. At face value, his threat is simple. Convince me you're in love with Peter, or people die. But that part matters because of the strategy underneath. Snow's first move isn't force, it's reframing. If he can turn the berries into a foolish romantic impulse, then the symbol drains away. No defiance, no politics. Just a messy teenage relationship the capital can project in high definition. So we're going to cover how he tries to turn Katniss into her own damage control. The victory tour becomes a traveling apology. Every speech, every kiss with Peter on command is meant to send one message to every district. You misread the games. There was no promise of rebellion here, only a girl overwhelmed by emotion. Snow's betting that if the audience accepts that edit, the uprisings fizzle without him firing a shot. Why not just execute her and be done with it? Because the games are a contract. You tell the districts, survive this horror show, and you get to live. Break that promise, and you don't just punish one victor, you expose the entire system as a lie. Kill Katniss now, and she stops being a person. She becomes a ghost. A martyr every district can project their own anger onto. So Snow reaches for the one loophole that still looks fair. The quarter quell. On paper, it's tradition, a solemn twist written decades ago. In practice, it's a targeted assassination wrapped in ceremony. You can feel the calculation. If Katniss dies in a second arena, then the games killed her, not him. The capital can shrug and say, those are the rules. But here's the problem. Every move he makes to contain her just upgrades her symbol, forcing victors back in shreds the illusion that the games ever end, and the districts finally see what Haymitch has known for years. There is a lot to uncover here about control, but the headline is simple. Snow can't own the Mockingjay, and he can't erase her, so someone else is going to step in and weaponize her better than he ever could. Coin is waiting for that opening. Coin's opportunity, Destructives 13, discovers its perfect weapon. Coin is waiting for that opening, and District 13 has been waiting even longer. You have to picture where they are when Katniss falls into their lap. This is a district that died on paper decades ago, then spent all that time underground. Literally, concrete tunnels, ration lines, strict schedules projected on the wall. You're not a person so much as a unit in a military spreadsheet. At face value, that sounds safe, orderly. No peacekeepers, no whipping posts. But here's the real question. What does living under that kind of constant control do to a population's imagination when every hour is assigned, every meal is measured, and every rebellion drill is mandatory? You don't get spontaneous uprisings, you get obedience. That part matters because 13 has weapons, but it doesn't have charisma. It has missile silos, not music. It's been hiding so long that if it just emerges as a faceless command center, the other districts have no emotional reason to trust its leadership. Why trade one cold capital for another? Why believe Coin's promise that this time the games will really end? So this is where we talk about why they need a face, a symbol who isn't from 13, who carries the scars the districts recognize. They can't sell a grey uniformed president from a ghost district. They need someone who's already been broadcast into every home, someone whose relationship with the audience is built on fear, grief, and that tiny sliver of hope Panem clung to during the quarter quell. Enter Plutarch Heavensby, former head game maker, now head of the rebellion's media department, basically. He understands ratings. He knows which camera angles made you hold your breath when Katniss sang to Rue, which interviews made Caesar Flickerman dab at his eyes. In his head, Katniss has already tested well with the entire country. She isn't a theory, she's a proven product, so when he pitches her to coin as the Mockingjay, he isn't guessing, he's doing what he's always done, reading the board. The Mockingjay pin, the berries, the salute in District 11, the wedding dress that burns into a black bird. Plutarch helped build that mythology from the inside. Now he's repurposing it as rebel propaganda. Watch Coin's first interactions with Katniss through that lens. There's no warmth, no "how are you holding up after watching your district burn?" It's a briefing. She lists demands, Coin treats them as negotiation points. Immunity for Peter and the other victors, useful leverage. Prim's cat, an afterthought. Coin's focus never drifts from what Katniss can do for the cause. Propo, morale, unity. And here's the chilling symmetry. Snow looks at Katniss and sees a glitch to delete from the system. Coin looks at the same traumatized teenager and sees a once-in-a-generation asset to plug into hers. One wants her dead, the other wants her branded. Both are playing a media war, and the Mockingjay is just the perfect piece. So the real question becomes, when your entire identity is built by people who only see your usefulness, what happens the first time you refuse the script? Terms and conditions. The Mockingjay contract Katniss actually signs. Katniss's first real refusal comes in a conference room. She's burned, sedated, dragged underground to District 13, and then suddenly everyone wants an answer. Will you be the Mockingjay? But here's the real question. When she finally says yes, whose terms are actually on the table? Hers or Coin's? At face value, the scene reads almost empowering. Katniss walks into that strategy meeting and does something she's never been allowed to do in the games or in the Capitol's interviews. She negotiates. She says she'll be their Mockingjay, but only if they agree to her conditions. And the very first word out of her mouth is not rebellion, not freedom, not districts. It's Peter. Her top demand is absolute immunity for Peter and the other captured victors. No trial, no punishment. A binding promise they will be spared as war criminals. That part matters because it instantly reframes her motivation. She isn't thinking in terms of overthrowing Snow or restructuring Panem. She's trying to pull a handful of specific people out of the fire. The revolution wants a symbol. Katniss wants a hostage exchange. Then she keeps going. She demands the right to kill Snow herself. She wants Prim to be allowed to keep her cat. She wants to keep hunting with Gale in restricted woods. On paper, these sound almost random next to topple a totalitarian regime, but there is a lot to uncover here. Each condition is Katniss carving out tiny pockets of personal control inside a system that has always treated her as a piece on a game board. This is where we talk about the Mockingjay not as a heroic mantle, but as a contract. Katniss is essentially saying, fine, you can put my face on every screen in every district, but I get these small, non-negotiable islands of self. Snow's death at her hands, her sister's comfort, the forest with Gale, where for a few hours she can pretend the games and the Capitol cameras don't exist. She's trying to write humanity into a propaganda agreement. Coin's response is fascinating. Outwardly, she accepts. She even performs respect. She calls for a vote, lets the room see that District 13 is listening to its Mockingjay. But watch the subtext. Her eyes go cold when Katniss insists on Peter's immunity. Her voice tightens when Plutarch backs Katniss up. Coin agrees, not because she honors Katniss's emotional needs, but because she believes she can outmaneuver them later. And she's right. The second Peter comes back hijacked, Coin immediately tests the limits of that promise, locking him up, weaponizing his trauma. The right to kill Snow becomes a scheduling detail for a public execution. The hunting trips with Gale are tolerated only as long as they serve training and optics. So no, Katniss doesn't stride into that room and decide to become the Mockingjay as a pure, ideological choice. She's cornered. Her home is gone, Peter is in enemy hands, the districts are already rising with or without her. The only power she has left is to turn this costume they're forcing on her into a shield for the few people she can't bear to lose. Which raises the next problem. What happens when the shield fails and the people she bargained for are the ones the war destroys anyway? Scripted rage, propos, retakes, and the battle for Katniss's voice. When the shield fails, District 13 doesn't hand Katniss comfort. They hand her a script. This is where we talk about those first proper shoots, because they're almost dark comedy. Katniss, fresh from losing everything, is marched into a studio, planted in front of a green screen battlefield, and told to sell the revolution the way Capitol victors used to sell shampoo. At face value, it's efficient, controlled lighting, controlled lines, controlled symbol. It's also a disaster. You watch her stand there in that armored Mockingjay suit, reciting Coin and Plutarch's carefully written lines about hope and unity. Her voice is flat, her body is stiff. Even Haymitch can't pretend it's working. Why does this feel so wrong? Because they're trying to run the games in reverse. Instead of a terrified girl accidentally becoming a symbol, they're starting with the symbol and hoping a girl will appear inside it. Here's the real question. Why do these failures matter so much to Coin? Because a Katniss who can read from a teleprompter is a Katniss who can be replaced, edited, muted. A safe Mockingjay is just another Capitol broadcast with different colors. But the story has already shown us the reason people care about her. The berries, ruse flowers, the salute to District 11. None of that was planned. All of it was messy. There is a lot to uncover here about the relationship between trauma and power. Plutarch, the former head game maker, understands TV. He knows the Capitol trained the districts to respond to spectacle, so they stage a new show. Katniss in a bunker, Katniss on a podium, Katniss reading lines. But the audience doesn't buy it. The districts have lived through too many real bombings to be moved by a green screen war. So they change tactics. They send her to the front, and then we get the moment that actually works. The bombing of District 8, the hospital in ruins, the Capitol hovercraft still in the sky. No green screen now. Katniss is shaking with real rage, not scripted fury. When she turns to the camera and spits, "If we burn, you burn with us." That line isn't on any cue card. It's a threat, not a slogan. That part matters because it becomes the rebellion's most iconic soundbite. Coin and Plutarch replay it, remix it, beam it into every district. Suzanne Collins is doing something very pointed here. The most effective propaganda isn't the polished ad, It's the viral clip of someone genuinely losing it in a way that feels true. Remember, she built this series while flipping between war coverage and reality TV. Katniss is both feeds crashing into each other. But there's a paradox buried in that success. District 13 needs Katniss's real emotions to win the war, yet every time she speaks from the heart, she steps further outside their control. How do you manage a symbol whose power comes from refusing to behave? And what happens when that same unscripted instinct is eventually aimed not at Snow, but at the person running the cameras? We're going to cover that next, when the Mockingjay starts turning on her own producers. Burning home. Why District 12 had to die for the Mockingjay to live. So when Katniss finally turns on her own producers, we have to ask, what actually welded her to that role in the first place? Because Coin can script propo all day, but none of it works until Snow burns her entire world down. This is where we talk about the ashes of District 12. Katniss's return isn't a quiet homecoming. It's a horror tour. You walk with her through blackened foundations, melted slag where the hob used to be, bodies turned to charred bones in the streets. The seam is gone. The square is gone. The only thing left standing with any power is Victor's village, sitting on its little hill, perfectly preserved. And right in the middle of that preserved life, on the table in her old kitchen, Snow leaves a single white rose. At face value, it's a flower. In context, it's a promise. I did this to you, I can still reach you anywhere. That part matters because it quietly answers a huge question about Katniss's relationship to the Mockingjay role. Before the bombing, there was always an escape hatch in her mind. Win the games, keep Prim safe, retreat to the woods, disappear. The fantasy of opting out, but when she stands in the ruins of the seam, there is literally nothing to go back to. No after-the-war home, no school, no bakery, no crowd that remembers her as just the girl who hunted. The Capitol has made sure that the only future paths are war or death. Here's the real question. Once your district is a graveyard, what does it even mean to refuse being a symbol? District 13 understands this instantly. Plutarch flies her in, cameras rolling, to capture that raw, unfiltered horror. Her feet crunching over rubble, her voice breaking as she talks about the dead. We're going to cover how 13 is supposedly the opposite of the Capitol, but in this moment, they're running the exact same playbook. Turn Katniss's trauma into content. They cut her grief together with footage of bombers, of smoking craters where houses used to be, and beam it across Panem. It's Rue's funeral all over again, but scaled up to an entire district. Back then, one girl covered in flowers sparked riots in 11. Now an entire destroyed home becomes the backdrop of the Mockingjay brand. Rue's song, Rue's memory, and now Rue's kind of deaf, innocent, helpless, are attached to Katniss's face in every screen. There is a lot to uncover here, because the reason Katniss works as a symbol isn't her archery skills. It's that every time the games or the war take something from her, someone in power packages that grief and sells it as hope. If District 12 had survived, if the seam was still poor but standing, would she ever have agreed to be the Mockingjay, or would she have dragged Prim and her mother back into the woods, hunting, trading, pretending the cameras were finally gone? And if that alternate future was possible, then we have to ask, who needed District 12 to die more? The Capitol or the people pointing the lens at her now? Trauma as design. why Katniss's wounds make her the perfect symbol. So when District 12 is turned to ash and only Victor's village is left standing, you're not just seeing loss, you're seeing design. Because by the time we reach Mockingjay, Katniss isn't just a girl on fire, she's a walking archive of pain. Her father blown apart in a mine explosion, years of starvation in the seam, 2 arenas, Rue's body in the meadow, Marvel's death by her arrow, Cato's screams with the mutts, Clove on the cornucopia, the quarter-quell ripping her away from any illusion of safety, Peter hijacked into hating her, and the complete destruction of her district. That's not backstory, that's scaffolding. Here's the real question. What does all that do to a person the cameras won't stop following? Trauma doesn't make Katniss stronger in some neat, inspirational way. It makes her hyper-vigilant, constantly scanning for threats even in safe spaces. It pushes her into dissociation, freezing, going numb in the hovercraft or in 13's hospital. It gives her nightmares so vivid she wakes up choking, and it leaves her with this deep, bone-level refusal to trust any authority. Snow, Coin, Plutarch, even Haymitch at points. At face value, that sounds like a PR nightmare, an unstable symbol, a Victor who might say the wrong thing on camera. But that part matters because it's exactly why she works. When Katniss breaks, when she screams over Peter's torture or sings the hanging tree in the ruins of 12, it plays as compelling because it is not scripted. You can feel that she's not performing rebellion. She's having an unedited stress response. There is a lot to uncover here about the relationship between trauma and propaganda. Snow understands it first. His whole strategy is hurt the people she loves and let the cameras roll. Threaten Gale. Parade Peter in front of her, bruised and brainwashed. Bomb 12 so that every time she remembers home, she also remembers the Capitol's power. He isn't just punishing her, he's programming her reactions for an audience. Then Coin and Plutarch pick up the same playbook and pretend it's resistance. This is where we talk about the propo. They don't hand Katniss a script and expect her to act. They drop her into mass graves in District 8, into the firebombed ruins of 12, into frontline chaos, because they know those environments will trigger something real. Cinna's Mockingjay armor isn't just costume design, it's containment gear for an emotional weapon. So why does it have to be Katniss? Why not any other rebel from any other district? Because most people are either too broken to stand or not broken enough to explode on cue. Katniss is that razor-thin middle, volatile, reactive to injustice, but still able to draw a bow and walk toward the lens. And that leads us to the disturbing conclusion the strong female character branding tries to blur. The story isn't about a tough girl choosing to be a symbol. It's about a traumatized teenager being used as a weapon precisely because of how shattered she is. The real twist is coming next. What happens when a weapon that unstable finally turns around and chooses its own target? Book versus movie. How the adaptation softens the Mockingjay machine. So, when that weapon finally turns around, here's the twist the movies soften without you even noticing. On screen, Katniss looks damaged, sure. She screams in the hospital, she shakes, she has nightmares. But in the books, you're trapped in her head while she cycles through PTSD, depression, and very explicit suicidal ideation. She spends days in closets, dissociates during briefings, and repeatedly weighs whether staying alive is worth it. At face value, She's the face of a revolution. Internally, she's someone who can barely get out of bed. That part matters because it undercuts the whole fantasy that she's mentally fit to be anyone's leader. So why does that difference matter for the Mockingjay machine? Because when you read the prose, you feel how often Katniss is confused about what's happening, or outright resisting it, even when her body is doing what the cameras need. The films visually emphasize the power of the propos, the explosions, the anthem, the slow-motion rubble, and it's effective. You feel the spectacle. But a lot of her internal bargaining, her constant "why am I doing this" questioning, gets streamlined. On screen, she can come off slightly more on board, more decisive than the girl on the page who agrees to be the Mockingjay, mostly because Coin promises immunity for Peter and the other victors. This is where we talk about Alma Coin. In the movies, she's this cool, controlled presence, a grey suit with a careful voice. You can sense something is off. But the books spell out her manipulations with a colder edge. You see how she times Peter's return as a weapon against Katniss's stability. You see how suspicious Prim's placement near the front really is. There is a lot to uncover here. Coin doesn't just benefit from Katniss's pain, she manages it, doses it, to keep her compliant and volatile in exactly the right proportions. Cinna and Plutarch get a similar adaptation shift. The films foreground their creative genius. The wedding dress turning into the Mockingjay costume, the perfectly staged propose, the way they understand television as the real arena. It's thrilling to watch. But in the books, we're going to cover a more uncomfortable angle, how complicit they are in turning a traumatized teenager into a brand. Katniss notices when Cinna designs outfits that weaponize her relationship with Peter, or when Plutarch talks about her as a piece on the board. The artistry is still there, but it's tangled with exploitation. So here's the real question. If both versions tell us Katniss never names herself the Mockingjay, who does? The answer is the same in print and on screen. District 13, through Coin and Plutarch, brands her that way because they need a symbol that grew out of the games and can sell their promise of hope to every district. The adaptation choices mostly adjust how aware you are of the manipulation, not whether it exists. And once you see that, you're ready for the final move. What happens when a brand built to serve the capital of District 13 suddenly refuses its script? Weapon or leader? The illusion of Katniss's command. So when that brand refuses its script, what does Coin actually do with her? This is where we talk about the illusion of power. On screen and on the page, Katniss looks like a revolutionary general. She's giving speeches, visiting bombed hospitals, standing on the front lines with a bow in her hand. At face value, you're watching a commander. But here's the real question. Who's actually calling the shots in any of those moments? Take the hospital visit in District 8. Katniss walks through the wreckage, talks to the wounded, promises them hope, and then watches the Capitol bomb the building. It feels spontaneous, raw, dangerous. Except the whole trip was planned by Plutarch, cleared by Coin, and staged by a propo crew that's been told exactly where to stand. Katniss can redirect. We're going to cover the pattern because it keeps repeating. The "if we burn, you burn with us" speech, triggered by real rage, sure, but immediately chopped into propaganda by Beatty and Plutarch. The frontline appearances in District 13's campaign, Boggs is the one with the maps, the orders, the strategy. Katniss is the asset he's protecting and positioning, not the officer he's reporting to. That part matters because it explains why she's kept in the dark so often. She's not told the full details of Peter's rescue mission. She's not briefed on Coin's negotiations with other districts or the long-term structure of the new government. When she tries to ask the obvious question, what happens after Snow, she gets vague answers, platitudes, or a change of subject. You don't give a weapon your whole battle plan. You point and fire. Nowhere is that clearer than with the Star Squad in Mockingjay. On paper, Katniss is the face of an elite unit pushing into the capital. In reality, the squad is initially a propo team, carefully routed around real combat so they can film staged actions. They're more film crew than strike force. Boggs holds the hollow, Cressida calls for retakes. BT triggers pods remotely. Katniss's job is to survive long enough to deliver usable footage. And when she finally tries to break that role, sneaking onto the capital mission with one goal, to assassinate Snow, that rebellion gets folded right back into the media machine. Coin doesn't cancel the plan. She quietly adjusts it. Suddenly, the rogue Mockingjay journey is just grittier content, another narrative beat to sell to every district. So is Katniss ever truly in command? Or is every apparent act of leadership just another way the adults around her package her for public consumption? Once you start asking that, you have to look very closely at the one moment she does make a unilateral choice. Because the only time Katniss really seizes control of the script, she doesn't aim at Snow. Snow versus Coin. 2 presidents, 1 target. Because the only time Katniss really seizes control of the script, she doesn't aim at Snow. And that tells you something crucial about the war she's actually fighting. On the surface, it's capital versus districts, tyranny versus rebellion. But here's the real question. Why do both presidents in this story spend so much energy not on each other, but on one traumatized girl with a bow? At face value, Snow and Coin couldn't be more different. Snow rules through roses and champagne, white silk napkins laid over a carpet of blood. Coin rules through concrete, rations, and schedules printed on grey walls. One sells excess, the other sells sacrifice. But this is where we talk about method, not aesthetics. Both of them understand the game's never ended, they just moved to the airwaves. Each president needs a victor-shaped symbol to project to every district, a promise that their system is the only source of hope. So, Snow goes first. When Peter appears on Capitol broadcasts, he's emaciated, shaking, insisting Katniss doesn't know what she's doing. Why show that to Panem? Because Snow is weaponizing Katniss's own symbol against her. The girl on fire becomes the girl whose boyfriend begs her to stop. That part matters because it plants a splinter of doubt in every watcher. If even her fellow victor has switched sides, is this rebellion really just another Capitol-style spectacle gone wrong? Coin's response is not to step back and protect Katniss's mental health. It's to double down on the Mockingjay. We're going to cover Peter's suffering. She essentially decides that only as fuel. Every new interview of him, more broken than the last, becomes justification for escalation, for bombing raids, for Katniss's next propos. You see this twisted relationship when Katniss bargains to be the Mockingjay only if Coin grants immunity to Peter and the other victors. She thinks she's negotiating terms. Coin hears, "Excellent, the weapon just agreed to load itself." Here's the pattern interrupt. Snow and Coin are enemies, but they share the same core policy. Children are expendable. Snow proves it with the Hunger Games themselves, year after year, turning district kids into televised warnings. Coin proves it in one concentrated decision: the parachute bombing near Snow's mansion, the one that targets capital children as bait and kills Prim in the second wave. Different ideologies, same calculus. If a few more bodies, especially young photogenic ones, will secure power, it's a cost they're willing to pay. And at the center of that calculus sits Katniss. To Snow, she's a rogue victor who must be discredited or destroyed. To Coin, she's a perfect delivery system for District 13's messaging, a living Jabberjay trained to repeat their war. There is a lot to uncover here, but the key is this: the real final battle isn't just at Snow's mansion gates. It's over whether Katniss will stay a weapon in someone else's hands or finally refuse the game entirely. Which is why, when she finally draws that last arrow, the target she chooses rewrites the whole war. The Capitol didn't create the Mockingjay District, 13 did. So if Katniss's final arrow proves she won't play anyone's game, we have to ask something uncomfortable. Who actually invented the game of the Mockingjay in the first place? At face value, you're told it's this organic, anti-capital symbol. A bird they couldn't control, a girl they couldn't kill. Simple. But here's the real question. If the Capitol didn't design the Mockingjay role, who did? This is where we talk about District 13. Because the bird itself is a capital mistake. Jabberjays were their living recording devices, abandoned in the wild, breeding with mockingbirds, turning into something new the Capitol never meant to create. That part matters because District 13 looks at that accident and goes, perfect, we can work with this. They don't invent the species, they invent the brand. The lowercase Mockingjay becomes the capital M Mockingjay, the second 13-layer strategy on top of Katniss's existing notoriety from the games. She's already the girl on fire, the tribute who buried Rue in flowers, the victor who held out those berries. Plutarch and Coin don't start from zero. They inherit a ready-made myth and then weaponize it. We're going to cover how deliberate that is. Look at the branding choices. Cinna's original pin is rustic, small, something she wears for Rue and for home. In 13, it turns into a logo. The uniform is matte black armor with wing motifs, closer to a military sports brand than a hunting outfit. Every propo frames her against rubble, against the smoking remains of District 12, or in front of massed soldiers and flags. You rarely just see Katniss Everdeen. You see the Mockingjay staged for maximum righteous vengeance. Why does that matter? Because the districts are not united by shared material reality. District 1's luxury factories, District 4's fishing, District 12's coal. Each has a different wound. So how do you get them all under one banner? You don't argue policy, you sell an image. A girl from the seam who sings to a dying child from District 11, who then stands in the ashes of 12, calling out the Capitol on camera. She becomes the emotional bridge between grievances that would never sit in the same room. Coin understands this perfectly. She doesn't intend for the Mockingjay to survive peacetime. Katniss is a transitional symbol, a living campaign poster whose job is to carry Coin across the war and into the presidency. After that, retire her, sideline her, or quietly let her break. Notice Coin never talks about Katniss's role in the new Panem beyond the Victory Tour. So here's the darker question. Is 13's plan for Katniss actually worse than Snow's? Snow wants her dead. His control ends at her heartbeat. Coin wants to hollow her out, keep the image, and discard the person. Infinite reruns of the Mockingjay with zero Katniss left inside. And once you see that, her final target starts to look less random and much more inevitable. Next week, the last arena, Prim, parachutes, and the breaking point. So when you get to the Capitol's front steps, you think the arena is over. It isn't. This is the last arena, and the game makers have just traded mutts and force fields for something quieter. Children, white snow, silver parachutes drifting down in slow motion. At face value, it looks almost merciful. The Capitol is surrendering, Snow is cornered, and suddenly there's this aid drop over a crowd of Capitol children pressed against the mansion gates, begging for the promise of safety. Then the first wave detonates. Bodies, smoke, screaming. And before you can process that, there's the second wave, timed with horrifying precision. Medics rush in, because that's what decent people do when the games spill into the street. Among them, District 13's medical team. Among them, Prim, the girl Katniss volunteered for. The reason any of this started, the second explosion hits the helpers, not the original targets. So here's the real question. Who designs a trap that punishes compassion? We're going to cover the tactical logic for a second, because this is where we talk about fingerprints. Earlier in Mockingjay, you get that conversation with Gale and Beatty, sketching out double explosion mines, first blast to draw responders, second blast to take out the people who care enough to run toward the smoke. It's abstract then, almost theoretical wargaming. Now you're watching that exact blueprint play out on Capitol children. That part matters because it doesn't feel like Snow. Snow is a theatrical monster. Poison, roses, televised fear, blowing up his own unarmed children at his doorstep when he's already losing? That's strategically stupid. But for Coin's side, a false flag operation that looks desperate and cruel from the Capitol's perspective is perfect. It turns the remaining loyalists against Snow, accelerates the collapse, and hands 13 a clean narrative. The tyrant murdered his own. There is a lot to uncover here, but the simplest reason is this. Someone is willing to sacrifice innocence to win the endgame of power, and the design screams 13. For Katniss, the realization is not instantaneous, it's corrosive. Prim's death doesn't register as random shrapnel from a chaotic battlefield. It's Rue all over again, but upgraded to a political tactic. Once more, a child she loves becomes a piece in someone else's games. First, the Capitol used Rue's body to threaten the districts. Now the new regime is using Prim's body to crown itself as the lesser evil. So why would Katniss keep believing in the Mockingjay after that? This is the fracture point. The suit, the arrows, the propos. Suddenly, they're not a bridge to a better world. They're just the new uniform of the same machine. If dead children are still the currency of power, then what's really changed between Snow and Coin? The relationship to violence hasn't. Only the branding has. And once Katniss sees that, the question quietly shifts from how do we win to who actually deserves this final arrow. The answer she lands on is the reason that execution scene doesn't go the way anyone expects. The arrow that counts. Why Katniss kills Coin, not Snow. So when we get to the execution, the stage is already rigged. Snow, the monster of 74 games, is tied to a post. Coin is literally above him on a balcony, and you're standing there with an arrow, the entire Capitol and every district watching one last broadcast, one last shot. At face value, it looks simple. The avenging Mockingjay finally gets to kill the villain. The story District 13 has been writing for you since they slapped that bird on your chest gets a clean, cathartic ending. Snow dies, Coin steps into the frame as the new president, and the game's era is over. But here's the real question. Why does this setup feel so rehearsed it might as well be another arena? We're going to cover what Katniss is actually executing here, because it's not just a person. Coin has arranged the children's retribution vote, dangled another Hunger Games in front of the victors, and then placed herself where Snow used to stand, above the blood, but framed by the cameras. Katniss has seen this pattern before. Cinna turning her into the girl on fire. Plutarch cutting propo of her grief into bite-sized propaganda. Coin promising Peter's immunity only if Katniss agrees to be the Mockingjay. That part matters because every choice she's made has been inside somebody else's script. So when everyone assumes she'll kill Snow, it's not just about revenge. It's about closing the loop on the narrative that made her. The abused girl from District 12 rises, becomes a victor, becomes the symbol, kills the tyrant, endorses the new regime. Neat, marketable, safe. If she looses that arrow at Snow, she's not just ending his life, she's signing off on Coin's promise that this time the violence will be kinder. You've seen enough dead children to know that promise is worthless. This is where we talk about the pivot. Katniss doesn't improvise when she kills Coin. She's been collecting data points. Rue's body turned into a symbol without her consent. Prim killed in a bombing that mirrors Capitol tactics, Coin casually proposing another games using Capitol children. Both sides have used kids as currency. Both sides have used her image as the commercial. So she does the one thing no one has built a camera angle for. She raises the bow and shoots up. In that instant, she stops being anyone's Mockingjay. This is her first truly autonomous political act. She chooses a target that breaks the script, exposes Coin's intentions in front of every watching screen, and refuses to let her face be the foundation stone of a fresh dictatorship with better branding. The Mockingjay was born from a failed government experiment. Now the experiment turns around and bites the handler. And that loops us back to the central thesis. Katniss became the Mockingjay because other people needed a weapon, not because she wanted to be a hero. The Capitol, District 13, even the rebels in the districts, all of them tried to own her story. By assassinating Coin, she finally answers the question that's been haunting the series: who controls Katniss Everdeen? For one arrow, the answer is no one. And the cost of that answer is that the Mockingjay, as a role, has to die with her shot. But if she kills the role, what's left of the symbol and of Katniss herself after the camera's cut? That's where we need to go next. After the fire, who is Katniss without the Mockingjay? So when the Mockingjay dies on the execution platform, what's left when Katniss goes home to the ashes of District 12? You expect a coronation, a Senate seat, at least a permanent place in the new capital. But instead, she's sent back to a ruined district with a drunk victor, a traumatized baker, and a cat. Here's the real question. Why does Suzanne Collins end her story with gardening, hunting, and nightmares instead of speeches and statues? This is where we talk about the after as a deliberate de-escalation. Back then, every move Katniss made was filmed and remixed into games or propo footage. Now, Her life shrinks to small, stubborn rituals. She hunts again, not to perform defiance for an audience, but to eat. She plants primroses for Prim in a yard that barely has neighbors anymore. She and Peter rebuild a plant book. They bake and trade and slowly reknit a relationship that was once a script for the cameras. At face value, that can feel almost disappointingly quiet after 3 books of revolution. But that part matters because it answers a promise the narrative has been making since the first arena. Katniss never wanted to lead anyone. She wanted to keep her sister out of the reaping and her district out of starvation. The Mockingjay was a costume other people kept putting on her. So why would a triumphant general's ending make sense for a girl whose defining move was refusing to play by the Capitol's rules? The boring recovery is the point. It's the one thing no government ever offered her, an unremarkable life. There is a lot to uncover here in the way the children reframe everything. When Katniss finally has kids with Peter, they aren't victory trophies, and they're not the heirs of a famous hero. They are proof of a different kind of promise, that a generation might grow up without being reaped, ranked, or rebranded every time they cry. No games, no training scores, no sponsors, no camera crews waiting to turn their fear into entertainment. The question shifts from who will win to will they ever have to know what a cannon shot means? And that's where Collins's critique of media and war really lands. Heroes in this world are consumables. The Capitol used Victor's trauma for ratings. District 13 used Katniss's pain for recruitment. Once their usefulness drops, they're discarded. Haymitch into alcoholism, Finnick into a single brutal mission, Katniss into a quiet corner of a half-empty district. So why is that quiet corner the closest thing we get to a happy ending? Because the real opposite of the games isn't power, it's privacy. We're going to cover this more in the next section, but notice the symmetry. The world demanded a symbol and forced Katniss into the Mockingjay. The story ends by letting her become something much smaller and much more human again. A hunter, a mother, a survivor whose life finally isn't anyone's broadcast. The symbol fades, and the girl from the seam is, for once, allowed to just be a person. But if Katniss steps off the stage, what happens to the Mockingjay as an idea without her body to wear it? That's where we need to go next. Hero, pawn, or something worse. Your turn in the arena. If the girl from the seam steps off the stage, what happens to the bird they built around her? At face value, the Mockingjay is just a pin, a mutated songbird born from the Capitol's failed Jabberjay weapon. But trace the path, and you see the whole system. That part matters because the symbol starts as state control gone wrong, then lands on a 12-year-old in a reaping crowd, then follows you into the arena. You get Rue, a song, a partnership, and then a body on the ground that Katniss refuses to leave as just another statistic of the games. She covers Rue in flowers, and without meaning to, she turns one dead girl into the first real crack in Snow's narrative. Here's the real question. When you choose to honor one child, how many districts suddenly realize they were supposed to grieve all of them? From there, the costume department takes over. Cinna's burning dresses, the wedding gown that explodes into a Mockingjay, the black battle armor in District 13. We're going to cover fabric and fire, but this is where we talk about authorship. Cinna is writing on Katniss's body, Plutarch is cutting the footage, Coin is approving the propo. The relationship between girl and bird gets reversed. The symbol starts wearing her. The berries, the kiss with Peter, the rooftop threat about a little hope turning dangerous. His fear is simple. He's losing control of the story. Coin's calculations are colder. She doesn't want Katniss the person. She wants Katniss the weapon the Capitol accidentally beta tested in the first arena. So you get the propo, the staged hospital visit, the fire is catching speech, all built on real ruins, District 12's ashes, the smell of burned bodies, the empty victor's village standing as a promise broken in stone. The games never ended, they just changed channels. And through all of it, Katniss keeps trading her image for one thing: protection for Peter, for the other victors, for the few people she can still name without flinching, until Prim, until the children's shield in the Capitol streets, the parachutes, and that final impossible choice on the execution balcony. One arrow. Not at Snow, but at Coin. Katniss became the Mockingjay not because she was destined to lead a rebellion, but because she was the most effective weapon both sides could point at their enemies. Until she turned around. So where does that leave you with her? Is Katniss a hero, a pawn, or something more dangerous? A person who breaks the game entirely by refusing to play the role written for her? Would the rebellion have worked with a different face from another district? Or was the relationship between her trauma, that pin, and those cameras the only combination that could ignite Panem? Was Coin actually more successful than Snow until that last moment on the balcony? And does Katniss ever fully escape being a symbol, even hunting in the woods with her children, years after the broadcasts stop? Tell me your read in the comments. Do you see her as savior, survivor, or system error the Capitol never planned for? And if you want more deep dives into Panem's politics, Victor's psychology, and the machinery behind the games, you can subscribe and stay in this little corner of Victor's village with us. Because the Mockingjay might be finished. But the question of who writes the next symbol, that's a story we haven't fully unpacked yet.